remember in Romans 1 it says, no one has any excuse for not believing in Christ, because even though we haven't seen him physically, we understand that he is because of everything that's around us. You know that there has to be a creator because there is a what? A creation. When we look around, there's not nothing, there's everything, and that in itself is evidence of God. So when we see Psalm 19, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. Day after day and night after night, the skies show us that God is who he is. But in truth, there's probably a second level, a deeper point of understanding on what it says in Psalm 19:2. And you can understand a lot about that if you go back past the beginnings of what they call astrology, which is ridiculous fortune telling by the stars. And you move back into an understanding of what God was really doing when he put all these different stars in the sky. So, first of all, does everybody understand kind of essentially what the zodiac is? I'll tell you that for me, there was a lot of misunderstanding about the zodiac, this collection of 12 constellations. And just in case there's somebody here that doesn't quite get what it even is or does, I want to clarify that. Does everybody know what star constellation you were born under? Everybody is associated with the sun because of the timetable on which you were born. I was born under Cancer the Crab in the month of July, the worst name and the worst sign. So when I was a kid, I always thought that meant July must be the time of the year when Cancer the Crab is most glorious and beautiful in the nighttime sky. That must be when Cancer is the big daddy that comes out right at midnight and shines so beautiful that it's the centerpiece of the sky. Do you know that it is exactly the opposite? If you're born in July, Cancer, your sign, is the one sign that you absolutely cannot see. And this is why. The zodiac is the collection of 12 constellations that the sun follows during the year. So in the month of July, if you look in the direction of the sun, what you know is that on the other side of the sun, in the stars that you absolutely can't see because it's daytime, if you could look through the sun and see the stars in July, there would be what? There would be Cancer the Crab. And it moves around, it goes through a cycle of 12 all during the year. So actually on the opposite side, when it's January and Capricorn has the center spot of the zodiac, then you can see the crab the best. What the zodiac is, it tells you where the sun is in a given month. And you always know because the star system that you're born under is behind the sun in your month. It took me forever to really understand that, but that's what it is. It's the path of the sun. Zodiac is ancient Greek for the way, and that's how you know who's who in any given month. The one that you don't see in your month is your sign, because that's where the sun is, and he's blocking the way to that. So let's look at the different star systems that are in the zodiac, and let me underscore 2 points for you that are very important as we get started. There were, of course, a lot of people in ancient times who were practicing not astrology, but astronomy. They were studying the stars, and it was very important because they were doing their crops seasonally by when the stars were positioned where. They were guiding their ships to various places by using the stars, and they were looking for things in the heavens by looking at pictures and seeing where planets came into various places at various times related to the constellations. And that's how astronomy, which is great, crossed over into astrology, which is really bad, in the Old Testament specifically says don't ever get involved in that. But in the old times, it was very important for them to watch the stars, and it's important to remember, your first bullet point is this. Ancient astronomers all saw the same thing. Let me go ahead and voice this, and I'm probably in agreement with you, that when you look up at the nighttime sky, what pictures do you see? Nothing. It looks like a bunch of dots to us, right? Maybe when you look at the Big Dipper, you can kind of see a scoop, which is not what the Big Dipper is, but that's another thing. Maybe, can you picture in your mind the constellation Orion? You can kind of see a hunter with his hands above his head. I get that one a little bit, but those are the only two. All the other ones, I can't see anything but a little collection of light dots in the sky. But in ancient times, the astronomers were all in agreement about what the constellations were, and that includes the astronomers that were working in different parts of the world. For example, the Mayans were fantastic star watchers. The ancient Chinese were fantastic star watchers. The Egyptians and the Arabs had a perfect sense of where every star was going to be every night and what group each star belonged to. The Egyptians and the Arabs and the Chinese and the Mayans did not communicate one with another because that wasn't plausible back in those days. The weird thing is they looked at the collection of stars that make up the zodiac and they all saw what? The same thing. Everybody is looking at this collection of 12 pieces of the zodiac and they see a picture that is if not exactly right, almost eerily similar to the ones that the other astronomers in different corners of the world have seen. The other thing is this: the ancient astronomers described the signs that they saw in vivid detail, and they saw the signs of the zodiac and the other constellations around them doing things, not just existing, but carrying out actions that were important in some kind of story. They didn't just see a scorpion or two fish or a crab. They saw characters that were playing a part in a drama, and the Mayans and the Chinese and the Arabs could tell you exactly what it was that those characters were doing. And within these other civilizations, and the Arabs, for some reason, seem to be particularly good at this, the stars within the zodiac, because a sign of the zodiac is many stars put together to make one picture, right? What's really interesting is each star within the signs had meanings that supported the picture that the astronomers were seeing. And we don't have time to get into that today, and I don't know a lot about it anyway, but if you were to really, really intensively study this, you would see that all of the pictures are supported by the individual names of their stars. If we have some time at the end, I'll give you one example from Orion that's real cool. So here are the signs of the zodiac. Let's look and then we'll move into each one particularly. Virgo the Virgin, Libra the Balance, Scorpio the Scorpion, Sagittarius the Archer, Capricorn the Goat, Aquarius the Water Bearer, Pisces the Fish, Aries the Ram, Taurus the Bull, Gemini the Twins, Cancer the Crab, and Leo the Lion. And it's important to make a note on this also. Virgo is the sign of September, and September in the ancient world is the new year. The Hebrews would celebrate their big festival of Yom Kippur to start the new Hebrew year. That wouldn't be January 1st, it would be sometime in the autumn season, because the sense was the harvest has come in, now we start again with the planning and the cycle through of the new year. So even though if you looked in the newspaper and you saw a list of the signs of the zodiac that were meant to give horoscopes, they would never start the list with Virgo because that's September. But you can know that in the ancient times, everybody started the list with Virgo, and that's very important. Page 2. Here is a picture of Virgo that is rendered for the purpose of just being a header page on a horoscope list. And what you see with Virgo is this kind of sensual woman with flowers in her hair, looking over her shoulder, and for some reason the artist has taken a license to give her wings, and that's just what in his mind he would imagine Virgo looks like. What I just want you to see from this page is that over the years, what the zodiac is and what the different signs are have been changed and changed and changed and changed until you cannot recognize them anymore. When the Mayans and the Egyptians and the Arabs and the Chinese looked into the sky and they saw the Great Virgin, they did not see anybody who looked anything like this. They had a very particular idea of what Virgo the Virgin was, and she wasn't kind of kneeling on one knee and looking over her head in a sensual way, and she definitely did not have wings. It's really important to understand that what the zodiac has become, which is kind of a silly thing for fortune telling, is nothing like what it was before astrology developed. And if you had shown this picture to the ancient Mayans and the Chinese, they would have gone, I have no idea who that woman with wings is. That is not Virgo. What's important is we look at the next pages, is to see exactly the position that the zodiac signs have in the sky and what they are doing every night when they come out. So starting from the first sign that the ancients used, it's Virgo the Virgin. And you'll notice, you see the line here, if you look on your diagram, it says the elliptic. That's just the path that the sun is following through the sky during the course of the year. So if the elliptic is drawn from here to here, it doesn't even look like that Virgo is standing upright. Like this woman seems to be doing just fine, and she's got wings and she's kind of niggling and going, hey. But this woman in the sky is not even able to stand upright. She's lying on her back. And that is really, really important. This is what you need to know about Virgo. The ancient astronomers from every corner of the world didn't just see a virgin. They saw a virgin who was in distress. They saw a woman who was lying down on her back because either she was physically ill or she had been under attack. Virgo was in trouble. There was a great problem that had come into her world, and this is why the Virgo of the ancients looks nothing like this woman. She looks like this woman. And it's also notable that even though Virgo in the zodiac was deeply troubled, every ancient astronomer saw her. Do you see in her left hand right there? They saw her holding a grain sheath in her left hand, and they could tell you the names of the little stars that were in the grain that were complementary to that idea. So Virgo is in distress, and when we see her, we cannot help but think of Adam and Eve, who were introduced into the world in a perfect virgin state of sinlessness and given a garden in which to serve God, where there would be no sin and no death and no deep trouble and no sadness. But suddenly everything has been flipped from here to here, and everything that was upright has been set back onto its back in a state of deep sickness. This is Virgo, and that is the first sign that all the ancient astronomers saw when they looked at the course of the sun through the zodiac. Anybody got any questions so far? Awesome. Remember Virgo. The next sign in the zodiac is going to be Libra, which is the scales, the balance. And as you look into the diagram, you can see in the very upper right-hand corner of the box, you can see actually the tip end of who? Virgo. So that shows you how the stars are lining up together and how closely they follow one another. There's actually, I mean, as I've said before, to us it just looks like a bunch of bright dots in the nighttime sky. But the astronomers saw a continuous band of constellations that not only made individual pictures, but touched each other as the story went along. The thing to remember about Libra, and it's very odd looking to me, but when the astronomers saw the scales in the nighttime sky, they saw that they were not in balance. A normal set of scales that was undisturbed would be sitting here just like this, and the two balls would kind of be hanging in perfect equality because that's their job. But when the astronomers looked at Libra, they saw scales that were out of balance. And if you understand a scale that's out of balance, it gives you a hint as to what the problem is for who? Virgo the Virgin. The reason that she is in distress and has been set on her back in sickness is because the whole universe is out of order, and the right order, the balance of things that should have been, has been disrupted. One side of Libra, the balance, is deeply out of proportion with the other, and that's why they're not doing this. They're doing this almost like one has been stacked on top of the other because the bottom basket is so much heavier. Those are good ones. I like the idea that, like Eve, Virgo the Virgin has been put on her back in distress. I like the idea that the scales are out of balance and something is really, really wrong, and one bowl is almost directly under the other one. Those two are good ones, but the story really gets interesting for me on the next one, which is the scorpion. Look at the picture of the scorpion, and it's important because if you did a Google image search of signs of the zodiac, you wouldn't get this information. You would just see a little tiny diagram of a scorpion, and he would be by himself, and they would want to tell you all the things that were going to happen in your love life and in your business if you happen to be born in this month. But watch, this is such an important part of the picture. Do you see the scorpion's claws, right? In the top picture on the third page here, where are the scorpion's claws? What does it look like he is reaching out for? Right. The scorpion is reaching out for the scales. It looks like that he has taken them and he has brought the sting of death to bear against the order of the universe. It's like almost Scorpio is pulling down the scales so that they will stay out of order and so that they will be always in a situation that they were not supposed to be in. Scorpio is, of course, the most clearly villainous of the signs of the zodiac. If you think about a scorpion, all you can think about really is the enormous pain that would come if you were ever attacked by one. And the idea that this creature is reaching out its claws to pull the scales out of balance is a really beautiful picture of the concept of sin. The Bible teaches clearly that in Genesis 1 and 2, there was no sin in the world, and there was no death or dying, and that Adam and Eve were doing work 6 days a week, but that work was nothing but pure God-honoring pleasure that they never even broke a sweat to do. There was perfect fulfillment, there was perfect harmony, there was perfect joy in the physical presence of God. But suddenly, Satan comes into the garden. He suggests to Eve that she ought to eat the one fruit that's forbidden, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And what happens to Eve? What happens to Adam? And on top of that, what happens to the whole universe? Everything is completely thrown out of order so that death and rebellion by the whole kingdom of nature throws everything into a state of destruction. It's the sting of the scorpion. He is the one who reaches out to take that scale and to jerk it out of balance. But look at the next one. The fourth sign of the zodiac. Here is Sagittarius, the archer. Two things that we've got to note about him is that, first of all, there's a very clear direction for his arrow. Do you see who he's shooting at? Scorpio. Shooting at Scorpio. This is the coolest thing to me. Every night when the sky is clear and you're on the right side of the calendar to see Sagittarius, you will see a picture of a guy who has his bow drawn back to kill the scorpion. Every night when there are no clouds and the season is correct, there is a big picture of a scorpion killer, clear as life in the nighttime sky. Sagittarius always, because stars don't fly around, you can sail your ship by them, they always are in the same place. Sagittarius always is ready to kill Scorpio. So that the story of Scorpio does not end in his victory, it ends in the idea that there's somebody who's going to come and sort him out. The other thing that you need to know about Sagittarius that's really important is that when we call him the archer, that's correct because he does shoot arrows, but he's not a normal man. You can see from the diagram, the ancients actually saw what? They saw the centaur. So in mythology, a centaur is going to be your body of a horse, torso and head of a man. And what was really the strong idea when you were talking about a centaur in mythology is that this was a person of a dual nature. You had someone who was two things at the same time. The mind of a man and the body of a man, but undergirded by a kind of power that was not earthly. Centaurs were regarded to be divine creatures in the mythological realms, And centaurs were absolutely viewed to be people who came from two places and were two things at the same time. So what you have in the first four signs of the zodiac is a woman in trouble, a universe out of balance, a villain whose sting of death has caused the whole problem, and a double-natured divine being come to kill the scorpion. Obviously, at this point, you sort of get the idea that there's more going on here than just crazy, weird little fortune-telling things and people trying to find out what's going to happen in their love life because they were born in a particular month. So on the next page, here is Capricorn, the goat. And this is where we really get into this important thing about the ancients, the Mayans, the Chinese, the Arabs. Everybody is not only seeing a character, but they are seeing a character who is doing something. And it's really interesting that everybody in the ancient times who was studying the night sky did not just see Capricorn the goat. Specifically, they saw Capricorn the dying goat. You see how the artist has rendered Capricorn's head as kind of perched in a downward position in defeat and in fatigue. And you can see how the artist correctly has put Capricorn's right front leg not stretched out to support a living goat, but folded back under as if the goat was succumbing to death. This is exactly what the ancients saw in Capricorn. This is a goat who has been slaughtered and is breathing its last and is bleeding out the last few drops of its life. And you'll notice, this is really weird, you never get this when you look at the zodiac in the newspaper or online or anything like that. Capricorn also is a double-natured being. This is the head and body of a goat, but can you tell it's very strange? It's the tail of a what? It's the tail of a fish, all right? And the ancients were all in agreement on this. There is something about Capricorn's death that is going to be connected to fish and fishing. And even as Capricorn dies, the tail of the fish seems to be wagging a little bit and held aloft. That's a very important note to make, that the goat is dying, but it seems to be supporting fish, and that part of the goat's dual nature is of course important in the salvation story. The sixth sign, and again it's really important as you look at the relationship between Aquarius, the water bearer, and Capricorn, the dying goat. Aquarius is a guy who comes every night and he's got a water jug, and what's really important to see about him is he is not merely carrying his jug, he's actually doing what with it?
Pouring it out.
Yes, he's pouring it out. And if you look at the configuration of the stars, it really does seem like the way that they're linked together physically, the water is being poured out from the position of Capricorn. If you can note that the tail of the fish touches the side of Aquarius, the water bearer, and that there's really more or less astronomically a direct line between Capricorn's dying head, his body, and the mouth of the jug. When you see a jug of water that is being poured out from the direction of Capricorn, of course, it can't help but make you mindful of the moment on the cross when they came to check and make sure that Jesus was actually what? Dead. Actually dead. It says they were going to figure out whether or not he was dead because they were going to do what with their little sword? They're going to pierce him with the spear, and if he was actually dead, what would happen? Water rather than blood would come out of its side. Paul gives you a really interesting verse in Corinthians when he comes and says, in the Old Testament, there was this crazy story about Moses and the rock. They were really thirsty, so Moses struck the rock one time, and what happened? This water came out. And then there was a really big problem later on with Moses because God told him to go back the second time and just speak to the rock, but Moses did what? He struck it a second time, and God was really upset and frustrated about that because his symbol had been disrespected. The water still came out, but Moses came in for a very big punishment because of what he had done. Anyway, at the end of that story, Paul comes all the way back in Corinthians thousands of years later and says that rock was Jesus. They were thirsty and they were going to die, but the rock was struck and the water of life came out for them. And from that point on, they didn't have to strike it again. The water of life would just always come when they needed it. The rock was Jesus. When we needed him to live, the water came out of his side. So this is what Aquarius does. He stands beside Capricorn and he pours out water, and you see it's really nice. The water just more or less takes a little curve and spirals all the way down from the zodiac and out into the heavens. So the seventh sign, as we move on, and again, when you look at Pisces, you can see that the water jug of Aquarius is making a nice stream across the nighttime sky, and these fishes appear to be swimming in the direction of this water. It's important to remember two things about the fish, and this is really essential to your understanding of the wholeness of the story. The astronomers in the ancient times did not see an indiscriminate number of fish, a big basket of fish that were however many there were. They always specifically saw two fishes, and those fishes were connected together at the tail by a band that kind of made a 60-degree angle in the sky. You can see if you look at the picture, it's really strange how they worked this out, but the two fish are one constellation that is called Pisces, the fishes, but the rope that connects them, this band, is also a separate constellation in itself. It is recognized as a separate group of stars just called the band. And what you see here in the number of fishes is this idea that two separate entities have been joined together and connected in a new way after they were redeemed. And I say redeemed, of course, because in the Bible, a fish is always the symbol of something that has been given redemption. The first message that Jesus gave to the disciples when he called them was, come and follow me, and I'm going to do what for you? I'm going to make you fishers of men. And one of the first things he told them, even before they were really following him for full time, was put out your bait into the deep water and do what? Put down your nets, because we're going to catch more fish than you could have ever imagined. And from that point on, the idea that a fish being pulled out of the sea was a picture of a soul being pulled out of the world of sin and death and being returned to its master. That was a picture of evangelism. By the fact that there are two fishes, you see that God has joined two completely separate fishes. You might even want to think in terms of the Jew and a Gentile, and brought them in to one bundle. That's the sign of the fishes, and the fact that there are two and that they are connected is essential to you understanding what's going on in the story. The eighth sign of the zodiac is Aries the ram. And it's obvious that in the human mind, he ought to be kind of paired together with what other sign of the zodiac? He should be paired with Capricorn, right? Because Capricorn is the goat and Aries is a ram, and we're talking about two very similar animals. But what's interesting is this: when the astronomers saw Aries the ram, they did not see a dead ram. They saw what? A living ram with his head lifted up, looking backwards as if he had been annoyed by something and was about ready to get up and make trouble for somebody who had made trouble. The nice thing about this is the story, if you're using human logic, it's out of order. Aries should be before Capricorn in the story. Why? Because Capricorn is dead and Aries is alive, and death should come when? After life. But in the zodiac, the living ram comes after the dying goat, as if the death of the goat was not the end of the story. When the ancients saw Capricorn in the sky, they saw a goat that was doing this with its head. But when the ancients saw Aries in the sky, they saw a ram who was doing this and was looking as if he had just been stirred and awakened and was about to stand up and do really impressive things with his horns. So in the second set of signs, you have this goat who dies. You have this water that seems to come right out of the body of a goat poured out across the sky. You have two separate fishes that have been joined together but seem to be existing in a living water. And you see a ram that has been raised to new life. That's really good. I think we all can track what's going on here in the zodiac. I have to confess, I have made a mistake here. If you have a pen, would you please do an S of inversion? When I made copies this morning, I hastily put Taurus under Gemini, and it should be the opposite. Taurus is the 9th sign and Gemini is the 10th. I have put them out of order. And if you would make a note, write a 9 by Gemini or Taurus and a 10 by Gemini, or just do an inversion S. That's my mistake, and I do apologize for that. The 9th sign of the zodiac is Taurus. And what you need to know about Taurus is that not only is he a bull, or a creature that the ancients might have called a reem, a judging creature with horns, is that his horns have been dipped down low. He's not got his head dipped because he's like Capricorn and he's dying. He's got his horns dipped because he's ready to do what? To charge. Everybody knows about what kind of attitude a bull has if his horns are dipped. The reason you might know this in finance, that we say that a good stock market in the future is going to be a bull market, is because the market's got its horns dipped and it's ready to do what? Go up. So here you've got Taurus with his horns dipped, and Taurus actually in the zodiac is the sign of judgment. For everything that happened with the scales and the virgin and the scorpion, there's going to be a reckoning. And there's going to be a time when everything in the whole universe that doesn't submit to the glory of God is going to be dealt with and shattered. Taurus is the judgment sign, and the reason that his horns are dipped was because the Lord probably wanted us to know he's ready to go. And at the end, everything is going to get sorted out. And it's interesting that Taurus is stuck here as the 9th sign, because everything else, 10, 11, and 12, is going to be very uplifting and marvelous things that are reflecting the glory of the church. But in the 9th sign, you see the judgment of those who are not a part of the church and have refused to submit to the teaching of the gospel. The 10th sign, which is in the wrong place on my sheet, is Gemini, the twins. And when I was learning this material, I was like, I've kind of gotten all this so far. I get that the virgin was having problems and the scorpion stung her and screwed up the scales and the goat died and the water came from his side. But I was like, what in the world is going to be going on with the twins? And it's so obvious that it was dumbfounding when I finally got to this part of the material. What is a twin? A single twin. What does he do? What is his job? A single twin is called the twin because of what quality that he or she has. It's so easy you can't even say it. Thank you. There it is. A twin is a replica of the other thing, right? To me, this is one of the most astonishing ones. Gemini is a picture of the church's relationship to Jesus. Your job as the church is not only to be saved by Jesus, but to do what? To become like the one who saved you. Romans would say, all things work together for good for those who have been predestined to be conformed to the likeness of God's Son. This is a picture of our number one work in the Christian life. And every day and in every way, we need to strive to have a resemblance that becomes more and more like Jesus. And this is really cool. It's crazy to think about this. It's terrifying. The goal of your life is just to be like him. so that as you move forward, the image is always shifting until you actually become as if what? A twin. So that somebody looks at Jesus and his heart and looks at you and your heart, and they see essentially the same thing. They see a family resemblance that is so powerful, it's almost as if it's hard to separate the two. Now, of course, we're thinking about the quality of our own lives, and we're going, no way. I could never even imagine being in the same universe as having that as a part of my life. But Philippians chapter 1 says, he who began a good work in you will do what? He will finish it. Will bring it unto completion. And Romans chapter 8 does point blank say, we are intended to have the likeness of Christ. There is to be a twinning. There is to be a family resemblance. There is to be a sameness in royal household that in the nighttime sky actually expresses itself through twins. Now, of course, one twin is always what? Older than the other. And in the case of Jesus, he will always be supreme. And even after billions and billions and trillions of years of living in heaven, there will probably be still new things that we are learning about his infinite wonder. But the Zodiac says, no, actually the Bible is correct. He began a good work in you and he intends to finish it, and that work is Christ-likeness. And it's interesting to note especially that the twins are not really standing up and doing a bunch of stuff. What is the posture of the twins? They're seated. And in Ephesians, we absolutely see that those who are in Christ are seated where? With Christ. Last one, and I have to confess, here comes my crab. How stupid is it when you're a kid and you find out that your sign is Cancer? It's not only Cancer, but it's the crab. That's stupid. Other people get to be like the archer or the lion or the guy with the big water jug in the sky, but you have to get stuck with the crab. You're like, man, that stinks. Of all the 12, that's the one I would not have picked. And when I was learning this material, I was like, when I came to number 11, I was saying, there is no way that the crab works here, because all the other signs, the dying virgin, the death-bringing scorpion, the dying goat, the fish in the sky, I got it. All of that makes perfect sense in the context of the gospel. It is easy to understand where those things fit, but I slapped my hand on the table and said, there is no way that a crab has anything to do with this as we come to the very end of the Zodiac story. And then I'm looking at this material and I'm looking at the research and I'm reading what all the ancient people said about this, and I was gobsmacked to get the information about Cancer. Do you know that a crab is one of the only animals in the world that can leave its old body behind and continue to do what? Continue to live. A crab leaves its old body behind and it goes on living. And at that point, I'm in. I believe that the Zodiac probably is intended to mean something, because there is no way that God was able to figure that out and to make an animal like the crab to give that sign to mankind. A really interesting point on the crab is the Egyptian astronomers did not see a crab in the nighttime sky. Almost always between the Mayans and the Chinese and the Arabs, there was perfect agreement. Yes, it's a dying virgin. Yes, it's a dying goat. Yes, it's a guy with a jug of water. But the Egyptians did not see a crab. And here's something that I think is really cool. What they saw was a very specific type of beetle that was common in Egypt. They did not see a crab, they saw an Egyptian beetle. But the crazy thing is what? That Egyptian beetle can do what trick? It leaves its body behind. It's the same thing that was specific to their culture. Here at the end comes the lion. And again, position is very important. What you see is that the lion is upright and he is facing what direction? He's looking back at the crab and all the other signs of the Zodiac, so that every night when they come out, the crab and the lion are facing each other, and the lion is standing up, just surveying everything that has happened and everything that he has done. And of course, in all cultures, in the history of the world, when you see the animal of a lion, you think of a man who holds what position? King, right? And Jesus himself came to be revealed as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the tribe that would be given the scepter to rule the world. So, what you have is a woman in distress. You have the scales out of balance. You have the villain bringing the sting of death. You have the archer who comes out every night to shoot down the villain. How does he accomplish that? Oddly enough, through the death of the dying goat. The water comes out from the side of the goat. The fish are banded together to swim in the living water. The ram lives again. The bull dips its horns to strike in judgment. The twins are conformed, one to the image of the other. The crab leaves his old body behind and goes on to a new life, and the lion surveys the glory of it all forever. That is not a way to tell what's going to happen in your business or your love life in a different month. That is the gospel. And that's why when you read Psalm 19, 1 and 2, and you see the heavens declare the glory of God, and they tell stories about the Lord all the time. The weird thing is that for people in the Gentile nations who had no knowledge of even what a Jew was or what had happened when Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac or when Moses led the people across the Red Sea, they never would have even heard those stories. But God still gave them the opportunity to do what every night? To look up into the sky and to see pictures of a creator who is interested in the work of redemption. All the ancients were in agreement on this, and all cultures from the first earliest days were looking at a picture of the Bible when they studied the stars. It wasn't just to guide their ships physically, it was to guide their ships spiritually, and it was to get them to a place where they could understand who God was, even if they had nothing to do with the nation of Israel, because they lived somewhere in Asia or in the Americas where they never would have encountered anything like Abraham or Moses. Now, just to end, a really interesting thing on top of this is that there's actually a lot more material. Each of the 12 signs of the zodiac has 3 more complementary signs called the decans, and all of those 3 signs for each of the signs of the zodiac, so there's 48 in all, 12 sets of 4, the main sign and its 3 complements. All those 3 complements, they also tell stories as characters that support the action of that sign of the zodiac. Also, if you look into the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, all of those names and the prophecies that were given over them by Joseph and by Moses support the 12 steps that you saw in the pictures of the zodiac. For example, the easiest one you can know immediately is the tribe of Judah was destined to do what? To bring forth the lion. The tribe of Judah is associated with Leo, just as all the 12 tribes are associated with one piece of the zodiac puzzle as it comes in the nighttime sky. Also, in the book of Revelation, have you ever read that beautiful part at the very end of the Bible where it says that God will have a new holy city that will be revealed from heaven, and that city is going to be built on a foundation of 12 precious stones? Do you remember that part? If you look at the names of those 12 precious stones, each of them corresponds to one of the tribes of Judah and one of the signs of the zodiac. If you undo it all and really take out your archaeological brush and scrape away the dust, everywhere you look in the 12s of the Bible, there is the progression of the gospel storyline in the pictures that you see in every direction. So, this was not a session in order to tip you over toward astrology, in which you try to find out if you should buy a car or not in the month of November, because this planet had come over here and it would be a very lucky time to do this or that. Obviously, that's nonsense, and God specifically warns against it in the Old Testament. This is a lesson to point you back to knowing that before the ridiculous world of astrology ever came to be, there was purely astronomy. And when God was speaking to men in ancient times, He loved them so much that he actually laid out the whole story from virgin to lion in the sky every night. And he imprinted that story in their hearts. For example, what if I ask you this question? What if I ask you, what is the first thing you think of when you see the color red? What would you say?
Blood.
Blood. Can you believe that? Everybody says blood. And when I'm doing camps in Africa and in India and in Europe, every kid in the world, they could live in a mud hut or they could live in a penthouse apartment. Everybody says what? Blood. If I say red, you think blood. And if I say blue, you think sky. Unless you happen to live on the beach, in which you might think both sky and water. God has wired some things into us that we can't even understand. You could have thought of apple, you could have thought of Bama football, you could have thought of strawberries, you could have thought of a Valentine's Day card that you had just gotten the other day. You could think of any of those things, but everybody does not think about those things. You think of what? You think of blood because it is wired into you. In the craziest way, God wired into the ancient people. It's a virgin, it's a scale, it's a scorpion, it's an archer, it's a dying goat, one after the other, so that even if their hearts weren't ready to accept Christ, they could see the story and they could reach out for him in their hearts. Last thing I want to say is this. To be clear, none of this research, not one word of what I have said originated with me. I did not figure out one speck of this material. I just stole it from other people who had written books like this. All I did today was to come in and repeat for you something that somebody else had said to me. So for all of this information, we're thankful to Dr. Seiss, who's a 19th century Lutheran pastor who is obsessed with astronomy. Before him, we're thankful for obsessed people, a guy named Seyfarth and other people who had for the centuries piled up this information so that in the year 2020, we didn't lose it. And we were able now, here in this class, to wipe away all that ridiculous nonsense about horoscopes and see the truth about what God was really doing when he designed the way the stars fell in the nighttime sky. Any questions? My name is Chip. Thank you for listening to this presentation about the zodiac. I want it to be known specifically that I did this for Marguerite Cameron. She pestered me to death for years about doing it. Now I have paid off and Marguerite can give me peace.